I see four groups of things we are doing. They're all equally important. Some are more short-term, but they're all starting now as far as I'm concerned. The first of those clearly is the present financial crisis at Necsa. There is literally very little money in the kitty. And we're in discussion with both the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy and through them other government departments, and also with talking to banks about getting support. And that is a short-term activity which needs to be done. That is, I think, going all right. We paid wages last month. We paid all the other bills last month, as I understand it. But that's going to be a challenge for the next few months while we sort it out. That's probably front of mind for most of the people at Necsa, and morale is a big issue in any kind of installation like that. So that's the first one. The second one is getting the current facilities, the current money facilities, if I can call it that, running properly. And there were two main ones of those. One is NTP, which is the one that exports isotopes, or makes isotopes and exports them. That's had about a year's hiatus. It's the biggest money spinner for Necsa. And that lack of something like R1 billion of income has really hurt the company over the last 18 months or so. We've got to get that company, that part of the organisation back into working or proper production order. Technically it's back as far as I'm aware, and I stand under correction, you said only in 2 weeks. The facility is now back up and running, and we're now in the mode of in production as we've been in the past. But there is clearly a customer base that has been let down over the last year or so, so we're going to recover that. So it may take us a year, a bit longer than that, to get back to where we were prior. And there's Pelchem, which is the fluorochemicals section of Necsa, which again has got to do work to both improve the equipment it's got, because some of its equipment has not been invested in for 30 years and is looking a bit aged, and also slightly limited funding into new products which could make more money for that side. So that's the sort of those two things I think have to happen reasonably quickly. And I think they are happening. The teams briefed me on those ideas. Then the sort of the next chunk, which is, in my view, the bigger lumps of what are for those and other parts of Necsa, what are the medium and longer term projects on the table today which need to actually be done to ensure the longevity of Necsa, and that's clearly a business case discussion. But an example is that the Safari 1 reactor is 50 plus years old. It really has got an end of, it's presently viewed that it has an end of life in 2030. So if we're going to go on being in the business and exporting these radionuclides, we need to, radioisotopes, we need to actually consider replacing that reactor. It's not going to be dirt cheap, but the question is, it must be a business case to go with it. And then a discussion with government as to exactly what is the acceptable cost of such a thing. And the third, and the other one, for example, so that's the third tranche of things to do, and there's similar things being discussed in the area of Pelchem, of the chemicals. There's an antiretroviral program which we're apparently looking at with Mintech, which is virtually ready to go, as I understand it, and we should be getting approvals from shortly. Although that needs to be resolved, I'm taking the view that aims to look forward, not backwards. I think the issue of political interference is always a good one for newspapers to discuss. I think the question is, we clearly we are owned by the shareholder, who in this case is the government, is therefore politics. We have to make sure that any state organisation is aware of what its mandate is from its shareholder, and within that we will function. I have not to date had any pressures or instructions from anybody. I would think that we've got to get Necsa to be functioning inside its mandate and inside profitability. It's part of a bigger issue in the country in terms of there's an element of Necsa which clearly is related to energy industry. And that clearly is an issue of some note. The IRP does talk about 2,500 megawatts of nuclear shortly after 2030, which means we start now, in my opinion. And clearly that would involve Necsa in the process. But yes, I mean, if I come back to these 4 things I was talking about paying wages and getting the things working again, and a minimum is that we are back in a situation where people see Necsa as somewhere which is stable and is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Yes, I mean, profitable it certainly shouldn't be losing money. It's elements of Necsa which are a state accountability, things which are related to the need for state nuclear activity, things like safeguards and things, which clearly nobody's paying for except the state. So the question I ask is, how much is the subsidy, how much is the grant from the state versus the commercial income?